I was erased by my parents who only loved my brothers, but I took ruthless revenge by exposing their cruel neglect and destroying their perfect family image. I'm Leia, a 24-year-old female and the youngest in a family of 5. Honestly, though, I might as well have been a guest in my own house because I always felt like I didn't belong. My parents made it pretty clear who their favorites were, and it wasn't me. My older brothers, Ethan and Nathan, got all the love and attention growing up. Ethan, the oldest, was basically their pride and joy. He was smart, charming, and the one they bragged about at every family gathering. Ethan's taking this amazing internship, they'd say. You get the picture. Nathan, on the other hand, was the golden boy in a different way. He was the sporty one, the life of the party, the guy everyone liked. He had trophies lining the shelves in his room, and my parents loved showing them off to anyone who walked through the door. And me? I was just Leia, the quiet kid in the corner, the, "Oh, you're here too" child. It wasn't like they were mean to me. They just didn't care enough to notice I existed half the time. I first started to realize how different things were when I was about 9. I have a core memory where one day school let out early because of a storm. Everyone else had their parents rushing to pick them up. I waited and waited, clutching my bag, staring out the window as one by one the kids left. I was the last one there. The janitor came over eventually and asked if my parents were on their way. I remember saying they must be stuck in traffic. I waited another hour, and when it started to get dark, I gave up. I walked home soaked to the bone because I didn't even have an umbrella. By the time I got there, my shoes were squishing with every step. When I opened the door, my mom was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She didn't even look at me. "Oh, you're back. Dinner's in the fridge," she said. That was it. No, "Why are you soaked?" Or "I'm sorry, we forgot you." Nothing. It wasn't just one bad day, though. Stuff like that happened all the time. My parents forgot to pick me up from school so often that my teacher started offering to drive me home. She'd ask, "Do you want me to call them?" I always said no because, honestly, what was the point? Birthdays weren't much better. My mom would throw these parties, but they weren't for me. She'd invite her friends and their kids, not mine. I remember one year I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone. She said, "Leia doesn't really have friends anyway." I was standing in the hallway, and it hit me so hard that I went back to my room and stayed there until the party was over. Ethan and Nathan weren't much better. Ethan loved teasing me about everything. If I brought home a good grade, he'd laugh and say, "What? Do you want a medal?" Nathan was the cool one, so he barely acknowledged me unless it was to roll his eyes or tell me to stop being so annoying. The worst part was that everyone outside the family thought we were perfect. My aunts would gush about how lucky I was to have such a supportive, rich family. Lucky? Are you kidding me? By the time I got to middle school, I thought that if I wanted attention from my parents, I'd have to do something big. So, I joined clubs, started working harder on my grades, and signed up for every after-school activity I could. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I excelled at something, they'd notice me. It worked, sort of. They'd say stuff like, "Good job," but it was always in passing, like they were checking it off a list. Meanwhile, Ethan was going on about his plans for college, and Nathan was racking up more trophies. Compared to them, I felt like an afterthought. One year, I made the honor roll, and the school sent home a certificate. I was so proud of it that I taped it to the fridge, thinking my parents would see it and say something. The next day, it was gone. My mom had replaced it with one of Nathan's soccer schedules. Even when I tried to confront them about it, it was like talking to a wall. I remember asking my dad why they never came to my school events. He said, "We're busy, Leia. You know that." "Busy doing what?" "You went to Ethan's debate last week," I fired back. He just shrugged. "Ethan's competitions are a big deal. Besides, we can't be everywhere at once." I didn't even bother responding. By the time high school rolled around, I had pretty much given up on trying to compete for their attention. Instead, I focused on building something for myself. I threw everything into academics and worked my ass off, but this time to impress only myself. It paid off. I became valedictorian of my class. I thought maybe, finally, this would be the thing that made them proud. I sent out invitations to the graduation ceremony, making sure they had all the details. I even reminded them the week before. The day of my speech, I stood at the podium and scanned the crowd, looking for their faces. Their seats were empty. Afterward, I found out they had gone to one of Nathan's basketball games instead. It wasn't even a championship or anything, just some regular game. I remember sitting in my car after graduation, holding my diploma and feeling completely numb. It didn't matter what I did. They were never going to see me. That moment stuck with me. It was the first time I truly realized I was on my own. I knew I couldn't rely on them for anything, not their support, not their approval, nothing. I think that was when I started planning my escape. College was my ticket out, and I wasn't going to waste it. When I started applying for colleges, I knew one thing: I was getting as far away from home as possible. There wasn't some big emotional goodbye when I left either. My parents barely acknowledged it. Ethan had gone to a prestigious university a few years earlier, and Nathan was already being scouted for college sports. Me going to school? Just another event on the calendar. I got into a decent school on a full scholarship, which was the only way it was happening since I knew they wouldn't help me financially, and they didn't. Ethan got a brand new car when he graduated, and my parents made sure Nathan's dorm was fully paid for. Meanwhile, I got a congrats text and nothing else. At first, college was overwhelming. I was juggling classes, working part-time, and trying to figure out how to live on my own, but honestly it felt freeing. No one was there to dismiss me or make me feel like an afterthought. For the first time, I started to realize I could build a life without them. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. In those first few months, I got random texts from my mom, usually something passive-aggressive like, "Haven't heard from you in a while." "Too busy for your family?" Once, she even left me a voicemail saying she missed me. But the tone made it clear she wasn't actually sad. I think she just liked the idea of me feeling guilty. I didn't bother replying most of the time. One time she asked if I was coming home for the holidays. I told her I couldn't afford the trip since I was paying for everything myself. Her response? "Well, if you managed your money better, you wouldn't have that problem." I nearly laughed out loud, as if I wasn't already scraping by with 2 part-time jobs and student loans. As the semester went on, I started to find my footing. I got a job at a cafe near campus, and the owner was kind enough to treat me like a human being, which was more than I could say for my own parents. It was nice having someone ask, "How are you doing?" and actually mean it. Even as I was figuring myself out, the cracks in my family kept getting bigger. Every so often, I'd check my brother's social media, and it was like looking at a completely different world. Ethan was thriving in his high-paying internship, constantly posting pictures of fancy dinners and vacations my parents were probably footing the bill for. Nathan was killing it in his sports career, with endless posts from games my parents were front and center for. There were no mentions of me, of course. No proud of Leia for doing her thing at college, or look at my daughter working so hard. It was like I didn't exist. One day, a coworker at the cafe asked me about my family. I didn't know what to say. "Oh, they're busy with my brothers," I said, brushing it off. But inside, I felt this familiar pang of anger. Why was it so easy for them to ignore me? Things came to a head during the holidays. My parents kept pushing for me to come home for Christmas, and I finally gave in, thinking it might not be so bad. Big mistake. The second I walked in the door, it was clear I was a visitor, not family. My mom made a big deal about Ethan's new job and Nathan's latest game highlights. No one even asked how I was doing. At one point during dinner, Ethan smirked and said, "Wait, what are you even studying again?" I glared at him. "Business, like I've told you 100 times. "Oh, right, business," he said, dragging out the word like it was some joke. Then he turned to Nathan. "So, what's the deal with your next game?" I sat there, barely resisting the urge to throw something across the room. My dad decided to pipe up, all smug. "Ethan and Nathan are really making the family proud." I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood, but inside I was boiling. After dinner, my mom cornered me in the kitchen. "You've been really quiet, Leia. Is there something wrong?" I stared at her. "Yeah, I'm great," I said, dripping with sarcasm. "Well, you sure don't seem great," she snapped back. "Maybe if you actually visited once in a while you wouldn't feel so left out." That was it. I exploded. "Oh, I feel left out because you've never given a crap about including me. Don't act like this is on me." Her face twisted. "That's not true, Leia, and you know it. Stop being so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I shot back. "You've ignored me my whole life. Don't stand there and act like it's my fault I don't want to be around you." I just shook my head and walked away. What was the point? The breaking point came later that night when I was in the kitchen getting some water. I heard voices outside. My dad was talking to the neighbor over the fence. Normally, I'd tune out their boring small talk. But then I heard my dad say something that stopped me in my tracks. "Yeah, we've got 2 kids, Ethan and Nathan. They keep us plenty busy. 2 kids, not 3. At first, I thought I'd misheard. I stepped closer to the door, heart pounding. My mom laughed and added, "Lia's off doing her own thing. I guess she's not around much anymore." By this point, I realized they weren't just ignoring me. They'd erased me. I felt a wave of anger rush through me. Before I could even think it through, I yanked the door open and stepped outside. My dad and the neighbor looked up, startled. "2 kids, huh?" I said, my voice shaking. "Guess I don't count anymore." My dad blinked, clearly caught off guard. Laya, it's not what you think. Don't, I cut him off, I heard you. You don't even acknowledge me as your kid. What kind of parent does that? The neighbor awkwardly mumbled something about needing to head home and scurried away. My dad turned to me, his face hardening. Laya, you're being dramatic. You're always off doing your own thing, so what do you expect us to say? What do I expect? I was shaking from anger. I expect you to remember I exist. I expect you to care even just a little about my life. But I guess that's asking too much, huh? My mom sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. Laya, you're overreacting. You're so sensitive about these things. I laughed bitterly. Sensitive? You've ignored me my whole life, and now you're pretending I don't exist and I'm the sensitive one? Laya, stop this, my dad said. You're being ridiculous. We've always supported you. Supported me? How exactly? You didn't even pay for my college. You show up for every one of Nathan's games, brag about Ethan's job to everyone. But what have you done for me? Name one thing. Neither of them said a word. They just stood there, looking at me like I was the problem. But I was done. Completely, utterly done. You know what? I said, stepping back toward the door. Forget it. You don't have to pretend anymore. You've made it pretty clear where I stand. I'm leaving. And don't bother calling me because I'm not coming back. My mom rolled her eyes and said, Oh, come on, Laya. Stop making a big deal out of everything. I didn't even reply. I went inside, grabbed my things, and walked out. That night, I drove back to my apartment in silence, replaying the whole thing in my head. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt, wondering if I'd overreacted. But then I reminded myself of everything that led to this point. The years of neglect, the empty seats at my graduation, the complete lack of care. This wasn't me overreacting. This was me finally standing up for myself. When I got back to my apartment, I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at my phone. There were a couple of missed calls from my mom, but no voicemails, no texts, not even an attempt to apologize. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just about leaving physically. I had to cut them out of my life completely. I unfriended them on every social media platform and updated my emergency contacts. If they didn't want me in their lives, I'd make sure they weren't in mine either. But even that didn't feel like enough. After everything they'd done, I needed people to know the truth. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went on Reddit. I wrote a post detailing everything, the years of being ignored, the missed events, and that final confrontation. I laid it all out, raw and unfiltered. I didn't name names, but I included enough details for people to understand just how bad it was. I didn't think much of what would happen next. I was just venting, getting everything off my chest. But by the next morning, the post had blown up. Hundreds of comments, thousands of upvotes, and messages flooding in from strangers telling me they'd been through similar stuff. Some people were horrified by my parents' behavior. Others shared their own stories of being overlooked or ignored by their families. It was validating in a way I can't even describe. I didn't feel like I was the problem. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to strangers at least. The attention gave me a weird sense of confidence. I decided I wasn't going to just sit in silence and let my parents sweep this under the rug like they did with everything else. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd make sure the whole world knew exactly who they were. I decided to dig up the receipts. I went through old emails, texts, and even pictures. I found a photo from my high school graduation with the glaringly empty seats where my parents were supposed to be. I found a text my mom had sent me after I got accepted to college that just said, "Good for you. Let us know if you need anything," which was laughable because they didn't lift a finger to help. I posted an update to my Reddit thread with all of it, screenshots, photos, and more details about what happened that night I left. The post exploded even more. People were furious on my behalf, calling my parents out as textbook narcissists and praising me for cutting ties. The support was overwhelming. Strangers were telling me I'd done the right thing, that I was brave for walking away. Some even said my post had inspired them to finally stand up to their own toxic families. Then suddenly, my parents found out, and they didn't stay silent. Hell no, they went straight into attack mode. My mom was the first to pounce. She left this voicemail, her voice fake sweet but absolutely seething underneath. "Laya, we need to talk. This post you wrote is causing serious issues, and I just can't believe you'd air family problems like that. Call me back." I deleted it. Out of nowhere, Ethan decided to chime in with an email that made my blood boil. "You're humiliating the family," he wrote, like he was lecturing me from a podium. "This is immature, and you're blowing everything out of proportion. Take the post down and apologize to Mom and Dad." Apologize for what? I didn't even bother wasting my time replying. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Nathan shot off a text. What are you doing? This is making everything harder for everyone. Just stop already. Harder for everyone? Are you kidding me? After years of being ignored and dismissed, they had the audacity to tell me to let it go. Absolutely not. If they wanted silence, they were barking up the wrong tree. It wasn't just within the family. Word spread to their friends, and apparently people started asking uncomfortable questions. A mutual acquaintance told me my mom had tried to downplay the post, saying it was just a misunderstanding and that I was going through a phase, but not everyone bought it. Some of their friends started distancing themselves. My parents' perfect family image was starting to crack, and they were scrambling to fix it. My mom, being my mom, went straight to Facebook. She posted this long, dramatic message about how heartbroken she was that her youngest had turned against the family. Classic victim mode. She wrote, "We always did our best for Laya, and it's devastating that she would do this to us." The comments were a total mixed bag. Some people blindly rallied behind her with nonsense like, "You're such a good mom. She'll come around." But others weren't buying her act. Someone straight up called her out. "Why doesn't Laya visit anymore? There must be a reason." I couldn't stop laughing when I saw it. It was like this little spark of satisfaction, seeing everything blow up. Sure, the attention wasn't exactly flattering, but for once, it was all on me and not on Ethan's awards or Nathan's games. That made me laugh even harder. Watching people finally hold them accountable was just the cherry on top. But my parents weren't done. A few days later, I got a message from an aunt, one of the few relatives I'd ever been close to. She said she'd heard about the post and wanted to talk. I figured she'd be on my side, but nope. When I answered the phone, she started in with, "Leia, I don't understand why you're doing this. Your parents aren't perfect, but they love you." I cut her off. If they loved me, they wouldn't have treated me like I didn't exist for years, and they definitely wouldn't have told the neighbor they only have 2 kids. She portrayed it like I was the one being difficult. "Families fight, Leia, but you don't air your dirty laundry in public. This isn't how you solve things." I told her, "It's not about solving things. It's about finally telling the truth. If they didn't want this out there, maybe they should have acted like parents instead of pretending I didn't matter." She didn't have much to say after that. The messages kept coming. Cousins, aunts, even a family friend who I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them boiled down to "you're being too harsh." But the thing is, I wasn't being harsh. I was being honest. At some point, I realized I didn't have to keep defending myself to these people. They weren't there when my parents skipped my graduation. They didn't see me sitting in the rain, waiting for a ride that never came. They didn't live through years of being ignored while my brothers were showered with love and attention. So, I stopped responding. Instead, I threw myself into building my life without them. I started spending more time with my friends, who were nothing but supportive. Mara, my best friend, even joked, "You should just adopt us as your family. We're way better anyway." She wasn't wrong. Around this time, I started making bigger moves. I legally changed my last name, updated all my records, and even changed my emergency contacts. I didn't want them tied to me in any way, not even on paper. It was freeing in a way I can't explain. At that point, they finally went silent, so I thought the dust had settled. Turns out that was just the calm before the storm. My parents didn't just sit back and let things slide. They went straight into full-blown damage control. Not to fix anything with me, of course. This wasn't about repairing relationships. It was about saving face. And boy, were they scrambling. They weren't just scrambling to save their reputation. They were actively trying to destroy mine. A mutual acquaintance sent me screenshots of a post my mom had made in one of her Facebook groups. She claimed I was unstable and making up lies because I was jealous of Ethan and Nathan. She went on about how she and my dad had done everything for me, but I was ungrateful and determined to hurt the family. The kicker? She ended it with, "It's heartbreaking to see your own child turn against you for no reason," complete with a sad emoji and a Bible quote about forgiveness. The comments made my blood boil. Her church friends chimed in with, "You're such a good mother, and Laya will come around eventually." One even added, "Some kids don't realize how lucky they are until it's too late." Lucky? Seriously? But the worst part was seeing my relatives join in. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years commented, "I always thought Leia was a little dramatic." Another relative messaged me directly saying, "You're being unfair to your parents. They've always been so kind to us. Are you sure this isn't just a misunderstanding?" Misunderstanding? That word sat with me for days. How do you misunderstand a lifetime of being ignored? How do you misinterpret being erased from your own family? I left them on read because I didn't trust myself to respond without saying something I'd regret. People in my hometown started connecting dots from my Reddit post, even though I never mentioned names. Suddenly, I was hearing from old neighbors, mutual acquaintances, and even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. One message came from a former neighbor, saying something like, "I always thought your parents were a little too focused on your brothers, but I never realized it was this bad. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Part of me wanted to say, where was this energy when I was a kid? But instead, I left it on read. Then came the relatives. Some sent apologies that felt more like them clearing their conscience than actually owning up to anything. Others weren't so kind. One messaged me about how I was tearing the family apart and needed to make things right. That one stung more than I expected, even though I deleted it without replying. As much as I didn't want to care, it hurt to lose some of my extended family. A cousin I'd been close to growing up sent me a long text saying, "I just don't know if I can be in the middle of this, Leia. I'm sorry, but I think it's best if we don't talk for a while." For a second, I wanted to argue with her, to explain everything she didn't know about my parents. But what was the point? If she couldn't see the truth after everything I'd shared, she probably never would. That realization was hurtful. Cutting ties with my parents didn't just mean losing them. It meant losing anyone who chose to stay on their side. I thought I was prepared for it, but feeling the cracks grow in relationships I thought I could count on made me question if I'd gone too far. But the real hit came when my parents escalated things. Out of nowhere, I got a letter from a lawyer, an actual cease and desist. They accused me of defamation, claimed my post was damaging their reputation, and demanded I take it down immediately. I sat there staring at the letter, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I'd thought I was just sharing my story, my truth. I hadn't expected it to blow up like this, let alone turn into a legal mess. I called a lawyer of my own, who assured me I was protected under free speech. Still, the stress was overwhelming. The legal threat wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how fast the story was spreading. Mutual acquaintances started messaging me, asking what was going on. Some were nosy, others were outright judgmental. Even at work, people were whispering. One coworker approached me and said, "Hey, I saw this post about a family drama. It sounds familiar." I brushed it off, but inside I was panicking. My professional life was supposed to be my safe space, and now it felt like that was slipping away too. Meanwhile, my parents' social circle was unraveling. People were asking them uncomfortable questions like, "Why didn't you go to Laya's graduation?" Or "Why does she feel so distant from you?" They didn't have answers, and from what I heard, some of their closest friends were starting to pull away. But instead of reflecting on their actions, they doubled down. It wasn't just my family trying to drag me down. Somehow, word had gotten to my workplace. A coworker casually mentioned over lunch, "So, I heard you've been dealing with some family drama." That Reddit post was a lot. My stomach dropped. "How did you even find that?" I asked, trying to sound unfazed. She shrugged. "Someone shared it in a group chat. Honestly, some people think it's a little intense, but hey, you do you for the rest of the day." I couldn't stop wondering how many people at work were whispering about it. Every time I caught someone glancing at me in the break room, I wondered if they thought I was the unstable daughter my mom was painting me as. What had felt empowering at first was now starting to feel like a grenade I'd pulled the pin on without thinking. Then Ethan, of course, sent another email, shorter this time, but just as infuriating. "You're humiliating us. Take the post down before you make things worse." And Nathan, ever the peacemaker, tried a softer approach with a text. "Can we talk? This is getting out of hand." I didn't reply to either of them. They weren't reaching out because they cared. They were reaching out to protect their own image. But honestly, I started questioning if I'd done the right thing. The post had felt empowering at first, like I was finally taking control of my story, but now it felt like everything was spinning out of control. I wasn't just exposing the truth, I was caught in the fallout. My parents had always been masters at controlling the narrative, and even though I'd flipped the script, they were fighting tooth and nail to regain that control. My friends tried to reassure me. Mara pulled me aside one day and said, "You don't have to go through this alone. We've got your back." And while I believed her, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was dragging everyone into my mess. I thought about deleting the post just to make everything stop. But would that even work? Would it undo the damage, or just make me look like I'd caved under pressure? The weight of it all was crushing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt stuck. I don't know what my next move is. Part of me wants to keep fighting, but another part of me wonders if it's worth it. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to breathe again. Maybe I'll have an update soon, but for now, I'm just stuck in the middle of this mess, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Final update. Hey everyone. Here's the update you've been waiting for. Alright, here's what went down. After weeks of feeling stuck and overwhelmed, I realized something. I was letting them win. My parents had been controlling the narrative my whole life, and here I was letting them do it again. That lawyer letter, the judgmental messages, the whispers at work, it was all just noise. And honestly, I was done with it. I sat down with my lawyer again, mostly to calm my nerves. They told me what I needed to hear. I wasn't in the wrong. The post was anonymous, factual, and there wasn't a single thing my parents could actually use against me. Once I let that sink in, it was like I could finally breathe again. That's when I knew I needed to reclaim the story. I went back to Reddit and wrote an update. This time, I didn't hold back. I laid everything out, the lawyer letter, the messages, the fallout with my extended family. And I didn't just talk about it. I showed proof, screenshots of the texts, the cease and desist letter with names blacked out, of course, and even a photo of those empty seats at my graduation. I wasn't just telling my side anymore. I was showing it. And wow, the response was something else. The comments flooded in, thousands of them. People weren't just supporting me, they were tearing apart every excuse my parents had ever tried to make. Classic emotional manipulation, one wrote. This is exactly why we need to call out toxic family dynamics. It felt so good to see strangers validating everything I'd been feeling for years. Even Ethan went quiet after that. I think he realized his usual smug, condescending emails weren't going to work anymore. Nathan sent another text. Do you really want to cut ties forever? But honestly, I didn't even bother replying. If they're not willing to own up to what they've done, what's the point? At work, things actually turned out better than I expected. One coworker who'd hinted at the post before brought it up again but said, I saw your update. That took guts. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. No judgment, no awkwardness, just support. So yeah, it was messy, but I feel like I finally got my footing again. My parents' attempts to control the narrative backfired, and for the first time, I'm not the one sitting in silence while they spin their lies. I've been focusing on the people who actually matter, the ones who show up for me, not just when it's convenient. The holidays are coming up, and this year I'm hosting a little dinner with my friends. No forced smiles, no fake conversations, just people who care about me for me. They tried to take me down, but here I am, standing my ground. It's not perfect, and I'm sure there's more to come, but for now I'm finally feeling like I'm in control of my own story, and that's a win I'll take.